Follow your own way sounds like good advice. It's empowering. It feels freeing. And for a lot of women, it lands emotionally. But for type A women, it often creates more confusion than clarity. Because when you're driven, capable, and used to figuring things out, being told to just follow your instincts doesn't actually tell you what to do. It leaves you alone with your habits, your pressure responses, and the same patterns you've been running for years, just with a prettier label.
Type A women don't struggle because we don't care or don't try. We struggle because our default response under pressure is already wired in. So when someone says, follow your own way, what usually happens is we follow our same pattern that we've always followed. Hustlers push harder. Overplanners think longer. Avoiders pull back. The advice isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. And if you don't understand your pattern first, follow your way just becomes repeat your way.
The reason this advice sounds so appealing is because type A women value autonomy. You don't want to be micromanaged. You don't want a rigid formula that ignores real life. You want ownership over your decisions. So when someone says, follow your own way, it feels respectful. It feels like permission. But here's the issue. Freedom without clarity doesn't automatically produce better decisions. It just removes those guardrails. And when pressure is high, most people don't suddenly become wiser. They default to old habits.
And this is especially true for type A women because we already trust ourselves to handle things. We've built that trust by being competent, reliable, and capable. So when someone hands us advice that says, you already know what to do, we assume the problem must be motivation or courage, so we try harder, we think longer, or we step away to regroup. But none of that actually changes the underlying pattern. It just keeps us circling the same response with more effort layered on top.
Here's the uncomfortable truth. Type A women already have a way. In fact, you probably have several. You know how you respond when something matters. You know how you react when stakes are high. And those responses have worked before, which is why you keep using them. The problem isn't that you lack direction. The problem is that your direction is automatic. It's reflexive. And under pressure, reflex replaces choice.
That's why this advice can quietly keep you stuck. When you're told to follow your own way, no one is asking you to examine whether that way still serves you. You're not pausing to ask, is this the best response for this situation? You're just doing what you've always done, faster, harder, or more intensely, and because you're competent, it works, until it doesn't. And when it stops working, you don't know why, because the advice never asked you to look at the pattern itself.
Let's make this concrete, because this is where things usually click. Hustlers here follow your own way and interpret it as permission to push harder. They take on more, to solve the problem with effort. If something isn't working, the answer becomes more time, more energy, more responsibility. Hustlers don't question whether effort is actually the right tool, because effort has always been rewarded. So the advice doesn't slow them down, it actually accelerates the burnout.
Overplanners hear the same advice and take it in a completely different direction. Follow your own way becomes think it through until it's airtight. They refine, they research, they optimize, they convince themselves that they're being strategic when really they're avoiding the discomfort of deciding. The advice gives overplanners permission to stay in preparation mode indefinitely because it sounds thoughtful and responsible.
And avoiders here follow your own way and finally feel justified in pulling back. If something feels misaligned, overwhelming, or emotionally heavy, disengagement feels like discernment. Avoiders tell themselves they're honoring their instincts, when really they're just postponing clarity. The advice sounds validating, but it quietly reinforces delay. Same advice, 3 very different outcomes. None of them actually solve the core issue.
And this is why self-awareness has to come before autonomy. You can't choose a direction you don't recognize. If you don't know how you respond under pressure, you'll mistake habit for intuition. And that can be dangerous, especially for capable women, because competence masks dysfunction. You're still producing results, so no one flags the cost.
Understanding your type A pattern isn't about labeling yourself. It's about noticing what shows up first when things start to get hard. Do you default to action, control, withdrawal? These responses aren't wrong, they're actually protective. But protection and strategy are not the same thing. Strategy requires choice, and choice requires that awareness.
For type A women, follow your own way should never mean acting on instinct alone. It should mean understanding which instincts are reliable and which ones are stress responses. Direction has to come before freedom. Otherwise, freedom just hands the wheel to your nervous system and calls it intuition.
When you know your pattern, autonomy becomes powerful instead of chaotic. Hustlers learn when effort helps and when it hides the real problem. Overplanners learn when thinking clarifies and when it delays. And avoiders learn when space restores and when it creates more pressure. That's when advice becomes usable, not because it's inspiring, but actually because it's specific.
This isn't just about productivity or work style. It's about sustainability. Type A women don't usually quit because they can't handle responsibility. They quit because they've been carrying it the same way for too long. Without understanding your pattern, every decision feels heavier than it should. Every choice costs more energy than it needs to.
And the worst part is that most type A women assume the problem is personal. They think they're too intense, too sensitive, or just too much, when really they've been applying the same strength everywhere without adjusting how it's used. And that's not a character flaw. It's actually just a strategy issue. Follow your own way isn't bad advice. It's just unfinished advice. For type A women, freedom without awareness doesn't lead to clarity, it leads to repetition.
Once you understand how you respond under pressure, your choices change. Not because someone told you what to do, but because you finally know which instincts to trust and which ones to pause.
Your way works best when it's chosen on purpose, not run on autopilot.